keep me awake, Dylan.
I love it.
How are you?
Yeah, he has many great ideas.
So why? So going through Rossi and Ronnie.
Well, I really love Jody.
I want to call the City Council meeting of June 18th, 2013 to order. Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Shopmeyer,
Here.
Adams. Here. Long.
Here.
Gray.
Here.
Marsh.
Here.
Kenyon.
Here.
Petty.
Here.
Tennant.
Here.
Mayor Jordan.
Here. Would you join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. The first order of business we have tonight is the nominating committee report. Della, I believe you have that.
Thank you, sir. Yes, as usual, we had many great applicants, and we are happy to report tonight. To the Historic District, we are recommending the appointment of Teresa Turk. Animal Services, we had no applicants for the veterinarian position, so we have that still opening. Stacy Fraser was reappointed to the business position. Ashley Yayok to the citizen at large term. Both of those end 6/30/16, as does Teresa Turk. Jacob Pesachek to the audit committee, expiring 12/15. We need applicants for the City Board of Health, no applicants. No applicants for the Construction Board of Adjustments. To the Environmental Action Committee, we reappointed Connie Crisp with a term ending 6/30/16. To the Arts Council, we appointed Houston Hughes, a working artist, term ending 6/16. David Wright, working artist, term ending 6/16. Shannon Mitchell, cultural citizen at large, term ending 6/16. Justin Hunter, expired working artist, term ending 6/14. Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, Richie Lamb, term ending 12/14. No applications to the Telecom Board. To the Walton Arts Center Council, we would like to recommend the appointment of Steve Clark, one term ending 6/16. Barbara Taylor, one term ending 6/16. To the Walton Arts Center Foundation, we would like to reappoint Mary Ann Greenwood, one term ending 6/16. I recommend the acceptance of this list.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second to pass the nominating report as read. Any other comments on that? All right, Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Shopmeyer.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Long.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Marsh.
Yes.
Kenyon.
Yes.
Petty.
Yes.
Tennant.
Yes.
Okay. Under the consent agenda. Number one, approval of the May 21st, 2013 and June 4th, 2013 City Council meeting minutes. Number two, RFQ 13-01 with Goodman Williamson Yates Incorporated. Resolution awarding RFQ number 13-02 and approving a contract with Goodman Williamson Yates Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $109,000 for engineering design services at the solid waste transfer station on Happy Hollow Road and approving budget adjustment. Number three, bid number 13-32, Frank Garner Construction LLC. Resolution awarding bid number 13-32 and authorizing the contract with Frank Garner Construction LLC in the amount of $41,280 for the purchase of an overhead lube system for the fleet division and approving 10% project contingency. Number 4, Williams Tractor, Fayetteville Case Farm All 105U tractor. Resolution authorizing the purchase of one Case Farm All 105U tractor from Williams Tractor of Fayetteville in the amount of $52,410 pursuant to a National Joint Powers Alliance cooperative purchasing agreement for use by the Parks and Recreation Department. Number 5, distributing equipment of Springdale John Deere 524K wheel loader. A resolution authorizing the purchase of one John Deere 524K wheel loader from distributing equipment of Springdale in the amount of $129,077 pursuant to a National Joint Powers Alliance cooperative purchasing agreement for use by the Solid Waste Division. Number 6, J.A. Riggs of Springdale 308E excavators. A resolution authorizing the purchase of two Caterpillar 308E excavators from J.A. Riggs of Springdale in the total amount of $239,734 pursuant to a National Joint Powers Alliance cooperative purchasing agreement for use by the Water and Sewer Division and the Transportation Division and approving a budget adjustment. Number 7, J.A. Riggs of Springdale 120 M2 motor grader. A resolution authorizing the purchase of one Caterpillar 120 M2 motor grader from J.A. Riggs of Springdale in the amount of $230,928 pursuant to a National Joint Powers Alliance cooperative purchasing agreement for use by the Transportation Division. Number 8, amend resolution number 94-13. A resolution amending resolution number 94-13 awarding bid number 13-23 and authorizing a contract with Centerpoint Contractors Incorporated in the amount of $289,675 for construction of an executive hangar addition at the Fayetteville Executive Airport, Drakeford. Number 9, 2013 Hazmat Services Revenue, resolution approving a budget adjustment in total amount of $11,239.80 to recognize 2013 Hazmat Services revenue from Washington County and authorizing associated expenses. Number 10, Transportation Bond Projects, resolution approving a budget adjustment in a total amount of $201,621 to transfer escrow balances to certain transportation bond projects. I will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as read.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as read. Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Shopmire,
Yes.
Adams. Yes. Long,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Marsh,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes.
Tennant,
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. Under unfinished business, number 1, amend chapters 151, 161, 164, and 172. An ordinance to amend chapters 151, 161, 164, and 172 of the Unified Development Code to modify certain standards within urban zoning districts, clarify and add flexibility to some of these requirements, to amend building height references and add a maximum building height to the C1 zoning district, and to provide supplement design standards for auto-oriented facilities within these districts. I will entertain a motion to go to the third and final reading.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to go to the third and final reading. Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Shopmire,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Marsh,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes.
Tennant,
Yes.
An ordinance to amend chapters 151, 161, 164, and 172 of the Unified Development Code to modify certain standards within urban zoning districts, to clarify and add flexibility to some of these requirements, to amend building height references and add a maximum building height to the C1 zoning district, and to provide supplemental design standards for auto-oriented facilities within these districts.
Jeremy?
Mayor, Council, as you know, about a month ago, I made an in-depth presentation over all of the UDC amendments related to form-based code, so I won't go through that again. But the one issue that we have been working toward, based on some questions that came up at the first meeting, is related to height measurements. And I passed out a brief memo and some potential changes to look at, not changes in the height limits within our downtown code or form-based codes, but how you measure those height limitations. One component of these amendments to our form-based code that we have recommended is to remove references to measuring height by story. and instead using a numerical value consistent throughout the city. That manner of measuring height is used in the majority of our zoning districts already. It's also common in other cities that we've found with form-based codes such as ours. This particular issue of measuring with both stories and numerical value of height limitations has come up in several occasions, and the Planning Commission has had to consider variances. And it's generally because our height limitations currently, as adopted by our downtown master plan, permits height limits that say things such as 4 stories or 56 feet, whichever is less, or 6 stories, 84 feet, whichever is less. So really there's 2 sort of standards, the test that the developer has to meet in those particular cases. In the Planning Commission's opinion, because they've approved, I believe, every variance that have come before them after reviewing those cases, they feel like that creates an unnecessary hurdle for encouraging density in areas where that it can easily accommodate 5 stories, for instance, within the 56 feet, or 6 stories, or 7 stories even with the 84 feet. But they're not really permitted to do that without requesting those variances. In our opinion, it doesn't in any way increase the actual height, how you see it, because there's still that numerical value assigned to the zoning district, and unless you vary that as well, then the stories still have to stay below that numerical height. And generally, that's what height limitations do by statute, is as it impacts adjacent property owners or the city, it helps to mitigate impacts to the skyline or view sheds that we have established. We are not proposing any changes in height limitations in our downtown area or really anywhere except the C1 zoning district, which has no height limitations whatsoever. We are proposing a height limitation on that one. But we're really recommending that we remove the manner in which we measure those from stories just to a numerical value. As I mentioned, Councilmember Marsh expressed some concerns about that, particularly about the possibility of creating, I think what you term pancake-style buildings, where essentially a developer tries to place as many stories within that numerical limitation as possible. In talking with our building official and our staff doing research, we really feel like right now, at least, the building code tries to address that. There's a minimum 8 to 9 foot floor heights that are required within the building code in most zoning districts, and we feel like that really prevents the majority of that from occurring. And I think even with switching to an all-story, if you measure just by stories, that necessarily wouldn't change that. You could still go to the minimum height limitation that you wanted to as well, unless you start getting into the building code itself. I think from our preference, we'd rather see this current iteration of the form-based code adopted as recommended by staff and the Planning Commission. However, as I promised at the last meeting, we did put together an amendment, and that's reflected in the packet. Really, it would be an amendment to adopt this Exhibit A, if you so choose to do that. And really, the amendments start on page 11. What we've done is really just taken out our recommended language and put back in what's in the current code today. So the 4 downtown overlay districts that have height limitations are reflected there. So downtown core, Main Street Center, downtown general, and neighborhood conservation are the ones we've been speaking of that I'm aware of. As you can see there, we haven't changed the height limitation. We haven't decreased it or increased it. All we've done is simply taken the stories out. So you can see there that that's what that reflects. If you chose to amend this and adopt this Exhibit A, it would change it back to what it is today, as opposed to amending it. Now, I'd be happy to answer any questions about that.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Well, thank you for putting the work into this. Whenever this question first came up, I think I was in favor of clarifying it so that we only reference stories, and I think I'd still be in favor of that. But relatively speaking, I think I prefer having a consensus around any clarification at all. And so if that consensus is around removing the reference to stories and just referencing the feet, I think that's better than not having the clarification in the first place. So I would prefer to adopt this as it's been presented and not amend it to the exhibit.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, I did have some comments. I was kind of hoping we could hear from the public first, because I do know
Sure.
that there are quite a few people who came to speak about this issue.
Absolutely. Any other comments from the council before we hear from the public? Okay. We'll take public comment. Everybody gets one turn at the microphone. Introduce yourself when you come up. The only time you get to come back after you've spoken one time is if an alderman brings you back to ask you questions, okay? All right, keep your comments to the chair. Don't get engaged with an alderman or a council member, excuse me. And let's begin. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, Mayor Jordan and Council. My name is Nina Shirky. I'm a member of the Historic Resource Action Group of Fayetteville Forward, as well as a Fayetteville native. I would like to speak to the amendment of the form-based codes as listed under the agenda under unfinished business. I live in my home close to the corner of Dixon Street and Block Avenue that I was born in and have subsequently inherited after my mother passed away. You'll see it here to your left. I have returned to Fayetteville with my master's degree in historic preservation and am using my education to restore my century-old family home, where I plan to live with my own family someday. After being approached by a developer who has all of the property surrounding my home under contract, I have learned that I have no setback protections for my property boundaries because my home is located in the Main Street Center District. On page 12 of 14 in the code under section G that you have in front of you, you can see that because of the way it is written, a builder could potentially build on 3 sides of my home, directly on my property line, 84 feet high, without any setbacks. A building of this magnitude would essentially block out all natural light into my home and drastically affect its livability, possibly even forcing me to move. Now, I understand that this language in the code for the Main Street Center District is aimed at encouraging infill, and I think it must be appropriate for Fayetteville. I would like to call your attention to the opening page of this ordinance you have in front of you, in which it states, quote, "Whereas the city planning staff has identified changes that will encourage development of a traditional town form and appropriate infill as its highest priority, at the proper scale and transition to surrounding properties. I ask you to look at this possibility for my home and consider if this looks appropriate to you." You'll see it down here. Is Fayetteville really a town that demands such high-density development at the expense of the well-being and quality of life of its citizens? One of the items on the same agenda tonight is to reduce the maximum building height in 2 districts from 60 to 45 feet because of their close proximity to single-family neighborhoods, because, and I quote again, "the staff feels this is a more appropriate building height." Now, I know that this code took a lot of time and effort to complete, and I'm really not asking for a major overhaul. Yet I also know that codes are revisited all the time. I'm just asking that you follow your own commitment to evaluate and bring back any issues for further consideration as needed, as it is stated in the agenda notes that you have in front of you. In the height regulations for many other districts, there is a paragraph specifying that any building which exceeds a height of 20 feet shall be set back from any side boundary line of an adjacent single-family district. I'm simply asking for the same considerations that other residents of single-family homes are offered. I also think there's a larger issue here of rampant development once again exceeding demand in Fayetteville, which we have seen before, and is evidenced by the multiple condos which currently sit empty downtown. Further, we have yet to see the actual traffic and livability impact of the new student housing complex currently being built on the corner of West and Maple Street, another on Lafayette, and yet another on Center Street. The developer who approached me has plans to build a similar complex around my home. Before he pulls his permits, however, I ask you to reconsider if this is really what we want Fayetteville to look like. I do believe there's a compromise here that will allow for appropriate infill while still maintaining the unique character of this town that I know all of you care about deeply. You have a great opportunity here to take some small steps which will have a big impact on the preservation of the character of this town and the downtown area, which has always been my backyard. I don't have to tell you that there is something special about Fayetteville, something that keeps natives coming back to once again call this place home, as I have done. However, if we fail to protect what makes Fayetteville special, it is on the path to becoming any town USA with nothing unique to keep people here. My aim tonight, however, is not to address the larger issues that I see facing the future of Fayetteville, but to simply ask that the few sentences that protect owners of single-family houses in other districts be written into the height regulation code for the Main Street Center District. As my home is one of the very few single-family houses in this district, the change to the code would not have a major impact, and I believe would be met with more support than resistance. This type of change would not affect development of commercial property next to other commercial properties, but would protect people like me who already live in the area. There are always exceptions made to every rule, and I believe that my unique situation warrants an exception and would foster a downtown that would still meet all of the goals set forth for this area in the 2030 plan. Now, I know that amending the height regulations for this particular district was not on the agenda tonight, but planning told me to go to council, and a member of council has told me to go to planning, and I have been sent back and forth trying to find the appropriate channels to voice my concerns. So tonight, I put the question before you, and I let you decide where to go from here. If you allow the code to stay as it is, you are sending a message that the preservation of the unique character of this town is unimportant. And more seriously, I think that the well-being of the citizens comes second to the interests of big developers and wider profit margins. And I don't think that's a fable that any of you believe in, nor any of the people that came to support me tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. You can leave that up if you wish. Okay, who would like to address us next?
Hi, I'm Cindy Arcega. It's nice to see all you guys here tonight. I haven't been here in a long time. But I was remembering that the last time I was here, it was talking about the same development, not this development, but a different development on this same property, and how it was going to affect the look of downtown. And this is my same concern tonight. I agree with Nina. Infill is a great idea. We talk about it and we want to support it. And I have businesses in town and they benefit from it. So I don't think that that's the problem. I think that we need to be reasonable about what we ask developers to do to protect our downtown and the way that it looks, and how we approach single-family dwellings in the downtown area, because we don't want to lose them. And this is a wonderful piece of property that really needs your consideration. And please think twice about it before you deny her the opportunity to protect her property. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else want to address us on this? Okay, I'll bring it back to the council. Okay, Sarah.
I just spoke with Nina shortly before the meeting, so I didn't get a chance to have this emailed around by the clerk, but her situation reminded me of a home I used to bike by on my way to work when I was living in Seattle. This was a situation very similar to hers. It's a small single-family house that is surrounded, it's the same pictures, I just printed out a couple copies, that is surrounded by a large multifamily building on 3 sides. And I don't think anybody won in that situation, not the developer with this hole in their building or the single family home there. So that is a real possibility of what could result from this code change. But also, I wanted to speak a little bit about just the heights in general. And you know, I've spoken before about the possibility that this will incentivize pancake buildings, which are the very low story buildings, the 8 or 8 foot ceiling heights. But more importantly, I think we're missing an opportunity to use building height as a very powerful incentive to encourage green building and energy efficiency. In many municipalities, they offer what is called an FAR bonus. It's a floor area ratio bonus. It's a height or density bonus as a reward to developers who meet certain energy efficiency standards or environmental performance goals. An example of that would be if we were to permit a 4-story building in downtown generally, if a developer came and wanted to was going to meet a high standard of development, let's say they were going to achieve a LEED Gold building, then we might incentivize that by giving them an extra floor of real estate. This is a revenue neutral way that the community can encourage green building. And I saw this work very effectively working in Seattle, where I was working as a sustainability consultant, and the city passed an FAR bonus policy. And so developers started coming to us wanting to get these extra stories on their building. They said, what do we have to do this? And well, you had to make your building very energy efficient. You had to include locally sourced materials so that you're putting that money back into our local economy. You had to employ low impact development techniques so that you weren't creating a stormwater mess. And so these developers reluctantly played along because they wanted this extra real estate that they could sell or rent. And in doing so, they learned that these buildings performed better, they had higher occupancy rates, and they had lower utility bills and lower waste bills. And so it began a race to the top. And so by having this experience, they began challenging each other to see who could do better. And that is what sparked Seattle's green building movement, which is really at the forefront of green building in the country. And I think that this is a real opportunity for us to do the same thing in a way that would cost the municipality absolutely nothing. So I hesitate to rush into these changes on the building heights, although I think that the rest of the changes proposed by the planning department look fantastic, and I really appreciate their work. But I think that I would recommend that we pull the references to the building heights and give them a little further consideration. This idea was I brought this before the Environmental Action Committee last night, and they support looking to incentivize green building in this manner, and so did the Fayetteville Ford Green Economy Group. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
So are you making,
I would like to make a motion, and I'm not even sure how to
well,
phrase
hang
this.
on
Maybe
just a
Kit
minute.
can
Don't,
help.
did Matthew make,
I didn't make any motion.
okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. So you want to make a motion to remove the building height
The building
discussion?
height discussion, and that would give us time to address this issue that Nina has brought to our attention and potentially incentives for green building. But then not hold up the rest of the changes that are proposed. And
So basically, you'd be making a motion to go to the exhibit that was provided tonight by Jeremy
yes,
Pate.
yes.
Okay. Do we have a second? Okay,
So your motion dies for lack of a second.
all right,
Say something?
yes, you may.
Even though you didn't get a second, I hope that you continue that discussion because FAR bonuses are something I've been talking about with staff for about 2 or 3 years now. And I think it's a good tool to encourage the kind of form-based development that we want. There are other tools as well that can be a part of that discussion. In El Paso, they give sales tax abatements to ground floor retail that is developed in their downtown or in other nodes they've identified. I think we can have that discussion because it's going to be an extended discussion. I think we should have that as a separate conversation, so to speak, because it will be pretty intense. And the other thing I wanted to say is because I feel like I've met with Ms. Shirky as well, and I'm sensitive to her concerns, and I think we all should be. But I want to make sure that we understand there's more than one way to address them. So I'm a big fan of, I guess what some people call Jane Jacobs style density. And, you know, I believe that we can, there's 50,000 people, more people coming here by 2030. And we can accommodate them with 3, 4, and 5-story buildings along our arterial and collector streets. We can accommodate all of that growth just on our arterial and collector streets, which means we can accommodate all that growth if we're aggressive with that strategy without impacting our single-family neighborhoods in a negative way, which I think is an important realization. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have buildings that are taller than that punctuate the urban fabric of Fayetteville. And I think the key word there is punctuate. You know, we don't need 8-story buildings everywhere, but it's okay to have a couple. And I think what we have to decide is, and I think what this comments are bringing to light, is that we have to decide where those punctuations are going to occur. And if that's not the right spot for them, we can decide that, but we shouldn't change the Main Street Center zoning regulations. That means we should change the zoning district that is applied to the properties. Maybe downtown general is more appropriate there. Maybe there's another zoning district that is more appropriate there if that's a property that we don't want to be an example of an 8-story punctuation in our skyline. And so I just want to bring that up because I think that's a conversation that we're going to hear more and more often. Even if this development proposal falls through, I know for a fact there's another person in California looking at the same property and is ready to jump on it if this deal doesn't go through. And he's going to care even less about the concerns of Fayetteville citizens. So this conversation isn't going to end with this, and we need to think about what the properties are zoned, not so much about changing the height regulations in a particular code. So I think we should think about the different options we have to address that concern.
Ron?
Mayor, I think one of the things that we need to look at in this, first of all, I want to say thank you for coming and providing the pictures and for your very well done presentation. Great job on that. I talked with Jeremy at one point in his office a little bit about these zoning districts because I happen to be a fan of this step back transition that Jeremy, you drew on the board a little bit for me, and I appreciated that. So when you look at this picture that we have here before us, I think what I see the problem with that mainly is that there's no step back transition. You're putting that in here, and it would change what we've done on Maple Street, right? Right now we have the street straight up and down, so when you walk by there, you're looking like you're in a tunnel or something. You don't have the step back, do you? Could you talk about that a little bit and how the step back transition in Chapter 161 helps to identify some of these concerns that we have heard from citizens, particularly about Maple Street?
Sure. So the step back transition was created, I think the first zoning district it was created in was with our downtown master plan. When we went through a pretty intensive public input discussion period with a whole subcommittee, architectural design subcommittee created to talk about building heights and just overall design standards in the downtown area. That was when basically it's a 15-foot step back was created. This is from the right-of-way though, it's not from adjacent properties. And that's really what we talk about generally when we talk about step backs. As Nina mentioned, there's also a step back that we've had in our code for decades from adjacent single-family districts, not from single-family homes, single-family districts, which is like our RSF4, neighborhood conservation, all the RSF districts. So we do still have that step back, commercial properties, office properties, things like that. There's a step back transition when you're adjacent to those districts. But because downtown properties and commercial properties oftentimes change over time, to my knowledge, I don't think we've ever had a step back from a side property line. And for the downtown master plan and after the downtown master plan, there's always been a 0-foot side setback. But generally, what we look at in terms of our downtown codes, we have step backs basically 0 to 15 feet. What we had proposed is adding that to all the districts. That's what you would be adding tonight if you approve this as proposed, is that right now, as passed by the original downtown committee and the council, there was no step back, for instance, in our downtown core, which is this area. You could just go 168 feet or 12 stories straight up from the street. We felt because we still have relatively narrow streets in our downtown, mostly 2-lane, sometimes 4 if you count the parking lanes, the height to width ratio that you look at really kind of gets out of whack. And so we felt like a 15-foot step back after that 4th story, or 56 feet, really would be more in context and in scale with what Dover Cole had recommended back in 2004 and 5 when they were here. So we kind of went back to the original proposal that we had seen in terms of that and recommended those step backs in all cases adjacent to the right of way. But again, it does not affect it adjacent to side property lines. If we adopted, again, what Ms. Sharkey mentioned, I don't think it would help her situation because her property is not zoned single family, it's zoned one of our downtown districts. So if we adopted a side setback from adjacent residential districts, it really wouldn't, really wouldn't solve that problem. We'd also have to look at a proposal to rezone that property, downzone that property in order for that to really take effect.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Would it be possible to put in some means of review for when one of these large multi-story buildings goes in next to a single-family home?
I think it would be possible. It would be certainly a subjective review at that point. I mean, really, one of the reasons we moved to, there used to be no height limits in most of our downtown. There were none. So really, it was a compatibility test, whether each one of the 9 of you felt it was compatible or not. You all voted in that regard. Staff made a recommendation, Planning Commission made a recommendation. And so we moved to a numerical height that whomever chose to participate in our downtown master plan process, which is a very, had a lot of public input, hundreds of people, they felt through that process this was the compatible height limitations for our downtown, where we want to be in 2025 at the time, 2030, as we move forward. So, I mean, I think that discussion, not that it can't happen again, but that's where we arrived at the height limitations that we got today, that we have today. It certainly could be added, you know, as an additional level or additional screen as part of a test for any project, and we'd simply have to make a judgment call essentially based on whatever factors that we have in the for reviewing that. But yes, to answer your question, it could be something we would look at.
I would really like to see that because I don't want our downtown. I don't want things to end up like that.
Well, let me just address some of this, because I've been on this council a long time. These very discussions occur when we're going to put a hotel down there. Kyle Cook and myself, at that time, he was an alderman from Ward 2, brought the building heights that we have in that downtown area right now, and could be anything, and then we reduced them down to, what was it, Jeremy, what are they now?
56 feet in our downtown general, around 4 stories, or I think it's 84 feet in our Main Street Center, if I remember correctly.
Now, there was a developer came in, was going to put a hotel down there, and we had to rezone that property. And it was rezoned, and I voted against that as an alderman, but that night the vote was 6-2 in favor of putting in the hotel, or the rezoning, and it was rezoned. And once it gets rezoned and somebody wants to build something in what's already zoned, then it sort of becomes, as long as you stay within the confines of that zoning, kid, and you can correct me here.
That's correct. I think it was actually a large-scale development request, but you're right. It did not, it did not have any height limitation, and a height limitation was placed at 84 feet for that particular corner.
That's correct.
And then there were some questions about whether or not it met commercial design standards. Was it compatible with adjoining property? And a 6-2 vote, city council said yes.
I did not feel it was compatible in the downtown area. But once it gets passed and it gets on the books, it becomes a little more difficult when somebody else wants to come in. We also brought, there was another, Nancy Allen from Ward 2 also brought to reduce building heights down to, help me out here, 48 feet.
I think it was 4 stories, was it not?
And that vote was, that particular resolution or ordinance failed 2-6. I voted for it, and the rest of the council, I believe, voted against that. So this is kind of a history on where we are right now, and I don't know where we go from here. Can we have discussions on building heights again? You bet we can. Absolutely. I do not know if we're going to change what's occurring on this particular development. I don't know. Maybe a legal question.
Well, yes, once a building permit has been issued, then it's a property interest and the developer gets to build according to it. I don't know where this project might be in the process, but oftentimes it can be too late once certain approvals have been given by the planning commission or the planning department.
And I do not know where this is.
It's not in our process.
Okay. Well, that's can be a different matter then, okay? I just want y'all to know a little bit of the history of what has occurred with that piece of property. I remember it very well. That was certainly some fun discussions then. But anyway, what other comments do we have, council? All right, well, what's before us is the amending the chapters, and we can discuss the building heights later, correct, Jeremy? Sure. Okay, all right? Okay. Any other final comments? Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Shopmire,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes?
Long,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Marsh,
No.
Kenyon,
No.
Petty,
Yes.
Tennant,
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. Now moving on to new business. Number one on new business, Levi Storage Center LLC, a resolution approving negotiation of purchase of 1.3 acres of property for construction of Town Branch Trail and the expansion of the Great House Park from Levi Storage Center LLC in the amount not to exceed $41,862 upon condition that existing liens on the real estate are released. Matt?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This is a piece of property along the Town Branch Trail that we're excited about getting started on. This is our last piece of property that we need to connect this trail between Great House Park and South School. Is a grant-funded trail between two grants, actually, the Transportation Enhancement and the Transportation Alternative Program grants. So we've been working with the property owner, and they did provide the letter, as is requested here, about releasing the liens on the existing real estate there. So Kit may speak to that more. But.
Okay, what questions do we have from that? Pretty straightforward.
I can say we have reviewed the letter, which is not enough yet, obviously, but what the letter does say that if we provide the check payable both to the bank and the owner, that we will receive from the owner a deed and from the bank a release of the mortgage. That would all be done at the same time at the closing, and so with that proviso, I think that this is fine, and you can, at this point, pass the resolution, and we will ensure that we get the necessary documents before we give them the money.
Y'all have any questions for Kit? Okay. Do we have any public comment on this? Okay, we'll bring it back to the council. It's a resolution.
Move we pass the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion to second to pass the resolution. Any final comments from the council? All I can say is, yay. Like this trail. Anyway, all right, Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Shopmire,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Marsh,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes.
Tennant,
Yes.
Okay. All right, number two. Pacific Vet Group USA Incorporated, resolution to sell about 14.9 acres of land in the industrial park to Pacific Vet Group USA Incorporated for $223,500 and other valuable consideration, and to approve a budget adjustment. David?
David Jurgens, Utilities Director. Staff and Pacific Vet Group representatives worked through the contract details, and that was emailed out to all of you at approximately 1:30 today. So the contract that we're looking at now is different from the one that was included in your packet. We had mentioned at the agenda session that we hadn't completed all those negotiations, and now they're done. What I'd like to do is point out the primary differences between what was distributed to you originally and what is in the contract that's being considered for final completion now. Unless, Kit, if there's a requirement to pull and change, the resolution would be the same. Essentially, there are three changes that PVG requested. Change number one was to take the city's mortgage and essentially make it the second mortgage behind the mortgage that they would have for the commercial development and the improvements that they're going to be making on site. So ours would be a secondary mortgage rather than a primary mortgage. That's in paragraph 2 of the proposed contract. And if anybody needs a paper copy of the contract that was emailed today, I'd be happy to provide one. Sorry, I should have said that initially.
Anybody need a hard copy? Everybody good? Okay. Go on, David.
Okay, excellent. I apologize for wasting paper then. I was trying to be prepared. So that's the first change, and that's in paragraph 2. The second change is in paragraph 3. That relates to the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. This is kind of a cart and horse thing. PBG's comment was they do not yet have an agreement with the AEDC, and they won't until after the land sale transaction takes place. So it's inappropriate in this contract to talk about the terms of that agreement when that agreement does not yet exist, since this one will come first. So it was made a little bit more generic just to allow for whatever that agreement will state between AEDC and PBG. They do intend to accept some of the contract with AEDC. The time isn't right until after our contract is approved. The last item had to do with the development and environmental protection goals. And rather than implying special treatment, either one way or the other, differential treatment for this development, they requested that be changed to just include that it complies, and I'll read the exact language. PBG Group USA Inc. agrees to comply with all zoning and land use requirements imposed by the city in connection with the development of the property. So it means that they would need to comply with all of our rules within our planning and development rules. And Jeremy has looked at those so he can cover any questions that specifically relate to the planning and zoning requirements on this lot. But that way it eliminated the potential perception that we're giving favoritism for this lot, and that we would give them an exception where they wouldn't have to meet all of our rules at the same time as it requires them to meet at least all of our minimum requirements on the lot. They did state that they intend to honor the intent of being as environmentally conscious as they can as they do their development. There is a representative from PBG here today to answer any questions that you might have, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you have about the contract.
Okay. Would you like to say a few words? Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Ross Wolfenden, and I'm actually the Vice President for Research and Development for Pacific Vet Group. And I'm sorry I was not at the last meeting, and actually our Vice President of Operations, I think, was here last time, so I'm not exactly sure what he told you and what he didn't. But Pacific Vet Group is a company that was originally a University of Arkansas spinoff company. Our roots have been based in Washington County. We're actually currently located in Johnson, but would very much like to come into the Fayetteville area. We hire many U of A grads and consider ourselves, we're an animal health company, but we're really an alternative to antibiotics company. We do a lot of work mostly with poultry companies, and the type of products that we develop are many probiotic type products that actually help regulate the microflora of the gut to improve performance, to improve feed efficiency, and to make the animals less sick. So that's kind of our business as a whole. So if you guys have any questions for me, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Any questions from the council? I'm sorry, again,
My name's Ross Wolfenden.
Thank you, Ross. Any questions for Ross on this? Okay, what about, any questions for David on this, on the contract? Okay, Sarah.
I see that you've taken out the environmental language and just said that you're going to meet the ordinances and codes that they would be required to meet anyway. So I was wondering, based on the concerns that we heard from the neighbor last time, if there was a way that we could get the Pacific Vet to agree to take the low impact development path through our code rather than just doing the traditional stormwater.
Well, I don't think we can ask them to.
Ask them to do what?
And maybe Jeremy can help me out with this. We have the low impact development standards that is an option, is that correct? And if we could ask them to meet that option instead of the traditional.
It is at the option of the developer to do that. It never was required to be mandatory on someone. We're trying to encourage this industry to locate in town. So, the city council can do what they want, but that was always designed to be an optional thing for them to do and not something we would try to require, just like a bill assurance.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to look out for the interest of the adjacent property owners, and they were very concerned about stormwater. And I think that, since we took out that environmental language that had been added, this might be a good way to hold them to that aspect of our development standards.
Hang on just a minute, Jeremy. Do you kind of have a rundown of what those development standards are?
So we have a low impact development code section within our Unified Development Code. It is an option for developers, and we as a policy and as a practice recommend following that option whenever possible. I think the challenge with it's not possible in every site. It depends on the soils, it depends on drainage, things of that nature. But things like site design strategies, site design elements such as bioretention basins, rain gardens, creation of dry wells, filter strips for runoff and water quality, grassed swales, bioswales like the city's installing out here in our parking lot to the north here, wet ponds as opposed to dry detention ponds, rainfall, stormwater capture and reuse, so utilization of rain barrels, cisterns, impervious surface reduction, so for instance looking at gravel pave or other alternative pavement techniques as opposed to concrete or asphalt, green roofs, so it runs the gamut of very small to very large, and you know it's kind of everything in between. What we generally try to look at with our low impact development ordinance is making sure that it's the most appropriate technique utilized for that site and its context, because not every one of these will work on that particular site. There are a number of options. We'd certainly, I was going to say anyway, whether this is passed with that or not, we would certainly encourage this applicant to work with the staff to look at low impact development techniques. I think I mentioned on tree preservation requirements last time, I thought it was about 5% canopy requirement in industrial districts. It's actually 15. It was much higher than I thought it was in both our I-1 and I-2 district requirements. So that does give more canopy preservation on site. We also, just in general, apply our landscaping just like we would commercial projects, so street trees along Morningside, buffers along the side property lines and rear property lines, outdoor lighting ordinance, all those things would apply just as if this were a commercial development in town. It's just really the design standards of the buildings don't necessarily apply. But that's a brief rundown, I guess, of the types of low impact development techniques that we have.
And what I understand with the LID ordinance that Councilmember Lewis brought a few years ago, it's voluntary.
That's correct. And so what we do is we encourage applicants. As you all know, those that were on the council, we had a lot of applicants coming forward and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, you know, and sort of greenwashing their projects in order to try to obtain approval. And so what we try to do is really define some standards. And if you're going to say you're going to do this, this is how we're going to review that to make sure it actually functions like it's supposed to function, so that we have some accountability there when someone's talking about one of these techniques. And so that's really what the purpose of that was, and we worked, as you mentioned, really closely with Councilmember Lewis and also the Environmental Action Committee in terms of trying to create an ordinance that would work for Fayetteville. It is currently still an option, and it's an option that we see being used more and more every day.
But it's still, I know that we put the language in the contract. It came back, right, David, that they did not agree to the environmental.
That's correct. Yes, sir. Because, and it was because it could have gone either way, and they just wanted to ensure that they did not receive any favoritism at the same time as they weren't held to any different standards.
Right.
Well, there's a proposed commercial or industrial development in my neighborhood, and I've had neighbors knocking on my door very concerned about the stormwater. They're all happy to see the jobs and the development, and they want that, but they keep pointing back to the Fayette Junction master plan and how the neighborhood had identified as their number 2 priority low impact development strategies. And so I called planning department to ask, well, can we hold them to this? And we actually have nothing that we can hold those people to those standards. So they're going to come into the neighborhood and they're going to develop in a way that's not consistent with that neighborhood master plan. And so I would really like to see, we want to encourage green businesses, and green businesses are attracted to green infrastructure. And so this is a great opportunity for us to get some green infrastructure commitment that would also help address some of the concerns of the neighbors.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, that's would be a fairly major change, I believe, to this agreement, and that's not something that I can bless here before the council today.
It's just, we're giving them a pretty good deal. There's a lot of public investment in making this happen, and I've seen on your master plan there are some indications that you do intend to do some low impact development techniques. So I think this is just kind of holding you to that.
Well, it's up to you all. What public comment do we have on this?
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I'm Steve Clark. I'm president of the chamber. Not only with this development proposal in front of you, but with all development proposals which come in front of you, I issue a word of caution to this council. If you're going to take actions to tell developers how to develop, if you give them a statutory scheme and a regulatory scheme that allows them to follow the option that they best believe fits with their project, and they meet all standards that you set out for them to meet, and then you later come back and say, we wish you would meet different standards, I think you inject yourself into a decision that's not properly yours. And in doing such, I have concern that you put us as a city at a disadvantage in attracting and expanding existing jobs or new jobs. The commitment you have to best sustainable practices is a very strong positive for Fayetteville. We had this discussion yesterday in the chamber board meeting. We discussed the fact that we don't want all projects, and we would not advocate in front of you for all projects. Some things are not suitable for Fayetteville, and some things are not suitable as they are proposed by developers for Fayetteville. The project itself might be a project worthy of your support, but only if they complied with all of the existing standards and regulations. I think this is a slippery slope, and I would ask you to be cautious about engaging in that. And if you are going to take that position, I'd ask that you have a lot more public debate and public conversation. I can assure you that from the chamber's perspective and the business community's perspective, there would be a parade of folks that might be here tonight saying, oh, now if we're taking this approach, I have an opinion and a comment. For PVG, they have negotiated in absolute good faith. They have committed to do everything that the city requires them to do. They have articulated that they will do more than that and have indicated some of that, as Councilman Marsh has pointed out. And to suggest now at this stage of the process that you should become a part of the decision-making process as to what is best for them, I think is, again, dangerous position for you to take. The chamber would not be supportive of you taking that action. We are just concerned that it sends the wrong message. The message of sustainability, we want you to send over and over and over again. That's the right message. But the message should also be, much as we do with form-based zoning, meet the standards, you get to build. We tell you what the standards are. They're available to everyone. Choose those standards, meet those standards. In our debate in our board meeting yesterday, the issue of Love's came up, the truck driving thing. Love's wanted to come to Fayetteville badly about a year ago. Badly. And they wanted to go out on the south end of town. And they said, we're going to bring 90 jobs. And man, we're going to bring sales tax revenue. And all we just need is a sign in the sky. And we said, we're not even going to go over to the city and ask. That's just ridiculous. That we don't do that. That's not who we are, nor is what we want to become. We've made that decision, and we're not retreating. And they said, well, we'll buy some land in Greenland, just south of the city, and we'll put a big sign in the sky there. I said, that won't work either. We have extraterritorial zoning authority, and what we don't, we'll fight for. That's not who we are. I think if this council moves forward to inject itself in the decision as to whether a company follows this option or that option offered by the city, It's taking a step in the wrong direction and sending an inconsistent message with what we sent with Loves, which is we're very proud of what we do. And if you'll follow the rules, we'll let you do what you can do. But if you don't follow the rules, we don't want you. But the importance is that you follow the rules. And I think that applies to the council as well. And I don't think it is your authority or your position to tell a company which of those rules they must comply with. So I hope you'll think carefully about this. I would urge you not to support this, but I think if you believe it's worthy of further discussion, I would urge you to put this on the council agenda and make this a special item so that we could have a lot of input and positions, because frankly, I was a little surprised tonight to hear this, and I think the business community would be surprised, and I think they would like the opportunity to come and express to you at least what their thoughts are. You get to make the policy. Believe me, I understand that. It's your policy, and you were elected to make the policy for our city, and you've done a very marvelous job. And this may become the policy of our city, but in this project tonight, I don't think it's time for it to become the policy of our city.
Mr. Clark, there is, how many jobs will this bring into the city?
It's going to bring 60 to 65 jobs, Mayor.
And what's the average salary?
$65,000.
That's a local company.
Yes, sir.
It's a green business.
Yes, sir.
They will make it a tax-paying entity.
Yes, sir.
And the state's invested some money in this as well.
Yes, sir. The big numbers.
Okay. All right, Council. Yes, Rhonda.
Thank you, Mr. Clark, for your good work and service to our city.
Justin.
I'd just like to say quickly that I think this is a great example of the city, the AEDC, and the governor's office getting together to find suitable businesses for the city of Fayetteville. There's been cities in the past who have gained businesses and jobs that I think could have come here, but we didn't have the kind of relationship between the city, the chamber, the governor's office, and AEDC that we have now. So not only do I think this is a good thing for Fayetteville, and certainly a good use for the industrial park, after all, putting industry in the industrial park makes sense to me, but I think we need to continue encouraging this sort of relationship and this sort of cooperation between all these parties, because there are a lot more companies out there that could come here as long as we all cooperate. And most certainly we need to pick the places that come here, but this is one that I think needs to be here, and we need to encourage it.
You know, Council, this company's dealt with us in good faith. They would fulfill all the requirements of our ordinances and our building codes. And if the council does wish to make LID ordinances mandatory, I can understand that, but to change it right now at the last moment when we're ready to sign the contract, I think, I don't think that's particularly fair. But I will leave it up to you all. Yes, Martin.
To make the motion to pass resolution.
Second.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to pass the resolution. Any other final comments? Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Shopmire.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Long.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Marsh.
Yes.
Kenyon.
Yes.
Petty.
Yes.
Tennant.
Yes.
All right, thank you, council. Thank you very much for locating here in the city. Look forward to working with you all. All right. Thank you very much, council. I know that's. All right, number 3, enact 116.02, door-to-door solicitation of private residences. An ordinance to enact 116.02 door-to-door solicitation regulations for private residences into the Fayetteville Code. Kit?
In order to enact Section 11602, door-to-door solicitation regulations for private residents into the Fayetteville Code. Whereas some citizens have been inconvenienced and disturbed by unknown and not properly identified vendors and peddlers coming to their private residence to sell goods or request donations. And whereas commercial vendors and peddlers who wish to sell door-to-door in Fayetteville should be regulated to ensure these vendors have proper identification, will abide by all restrictions as to when and where such vending will be allowed, and will not bother citizens who have register with the city that they do not wish commercial vendors to come to their residence, and whereas persons who wish to express religious and political beliefs have First Amendment speech rights which cannot be impinged by the city and thus may not be prohibited from going door to door to exercise their First Amendment rights. Be it ordained, now therefore be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Fayetteville, Arkansas, Section 1, that the City Council of the City of Fayetteville, Arkansas hereby enacts Section 11602, door-to-door solicitation at private residence of the Fayetteville Code as shown in Exhibit A attached hereto and made a part hereof.
Justin, you want?
Yes, thank you. The reason I brought this forward, and this states it pretty well, but in East Fayetteville especially, I've fielded numerous complaints, actually for quite a while, about the door-to-door solicitation that seems to be geared in these ways where people are coming around and trying to sell magazines, trying to sell scholarship raising activities, whatever it may be. I know Alderman Schottmeyer fielded a lot of these complaints as well, and it really got, I think, bad not too long ago when the university sent something out that there was a scam going on. We had several elderly people on television that had been taken advantage of. We had someone in our neighborhood claiming to be raising money for scholarship, that they were local. A neighbor tracked them down and they ended up admitting they were from St. Louis and they were just down, you know, they said, we just sell newspaper, or we just sell magazines. And the people that bought these magazines never got them. So this was just people stealing money, essentially. And so what I wanted to do was come up with a way to stop this. There's really no way to stop it completely, but what I thought this did, and I thought the city attorney has done a wonderful job putting this together, because it puts a barrier up. It makes it harder for people to come swooping in here and selling something door to door that might be an illegitimate type business. This is a case, I think, of a few bad apples spoiling the whole bunch, as the old saying goes, because I know there are good, decent people that are going out and selling door to door, and that can still continue. But I think registering with the city, having to come here and put your name down, who you are, what you're doing, what you're selling, is a barrier. And I'd like to get it out there in the public and let it be known that Fayetteville is not an easy place to come and take advantage of its citizens. And I think this does this pretty well. And again, I thank the city attorney for doing what he's done, and I know we can have good conversation about it as some of the points we've already discussed. So I appreciate it.
What questions from the council? Yes.
Could you explain to me the requirements that already exist in our business permitting code section? Wouldn't all door-to-door solicitors, if they are for-profit, have to have a business permit and be subject to a fine if they didn't?
I'm not sure if they would or not. I thought that you had to have a business location in the city. Is that not right, Jeremy?
You need to have a physical address within the city.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sarah?
I really support the intent of this but I just want to make sure that we are protecting people's First Amendment right to petition, and so people will still have the right to petition without having to register with the city or pay any money. Is that correct?
That is correct. If you look at the section of the exhibit, which is of course what has most of the ordinance itself in it, there are exemptions. G is exemptions for the government officials, H is for nonprofits, and then I is a very strong one, which says permits waived for political and religious free speech and for Girl Scouts. And it says that although everyone going door to door must respect and not go to the door of a citizen who has personally posted a no solicitation sign, because that's an individual action, not an action by the government, and may only go door to door during the daytime hour and evening hours allowed, and conform to the other requirements. When someone says leave, they must leave, basically. Persons exercising their First Amendment political or religious free speech rights are otherwise exempted from this entire section. So they don't have to get a permit, they don't have to go report or anything. And I think that's really constitutional law. I don't think that we can require them to do that. And in fact, when I first was writing this, and I did pattern this after the Springdale ordinance. It's not exactly the same as what Springdale adopted a few months ago. My whereas clauses, I had a couple parts in there that really should not be in there anymore. In the second whereas clause, I talked about citizens registering for a no solicitation list. Well, that's not in there. That'd be a big burden on the planning department. I did not include that, so I'd ask that that part be amended here tonight and removed. And in this next one, I talked about First Amendment rights, and I said as long as they do not seek or accept money. Well, again, I think that's probably beyond what we should do, and so I'd like to have, even those whereas clauses they're not operative, but they do kind of explain why we're doing it, so I would like that those two endings of the second and third whereas clauses be removed, and so it would be, as I read it on the third clause, and as I just explained it there. So I'd like those to be removed at this meeting if you would, because that's not what this ordinance does.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Repeat what you want on that, for sure.
Okay, if you look at the whereas clauses in the ordinance, the second one had the language that I think should be deleted where it says, and will not bother citizens who have registered with the city of Fayetteville that they do not wish commercial vendors to come to their residence.
Okay.
That would require planning to have a complete list of that and give it to each one. Hopefully, we don't have to do that, and then place a big burden on them, so I'd like that out. And then the other language I'd like out is that after it's talking about people exercising their First Amendment rights, I'd like to remove the language, as long as they do not seek nor accept money, pledges, or donations, and have that language removed.
Okay. All right, do we need two amendments or just the one?
That's one.
All right. You made that motion correct, Matthew?
Yes, sir.
Did we get a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Now, is there any discussion on the amendments from the public? I'm sorry. Now, we're talking about the amendments, not the final.
To the whereas clause?
Yeah,
Just
these
the
are
whereas
they're taking out, the amendments to take out certain sections. All right, I'm gonna bring it back to the council. Any final discussion on that? Okay? All right, Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Shopmire.
Yes.
Adams. Yes. Long.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Marsh.
Yes.
Kenyon.
Yes.
Petty.
Yes.
Tennant.
Yes.
Okay, now we have the amended ordinance. Now, I will take some public comment on that. Everybody gets one turn at the microphone. Introduce yourself when you come. I know it's not a big crowd, but,
I'll need a bathroom break. Sorry, just kidding. A little levity. I'm Brian Smith. I've been a resident of Northwest Arkansas for about 23 years, Fayetteville for 14 years. And I represent the Northwest Arkansas Times, which has been a Fayetteville company for 152 years. Okay. Also, under that umbrella is the Arkansas Democrat Gazette that I represent. I do have a couple issues with the ordinance, but I will say that we are not opposed to a door-to-door ordinance per se. We are opposed when there are less restrictive means to accomplish the city's objectives. And I'll address those one by one, and then I'll take questions. Something, though, that did just pop into my head, that I do think there might be a concern with requiring a business license. If the business license does require a physical business address within the city, I do believe that that may run into some 14th Amendment issues with interstate commerce from people coming to the city to conduct business, lawful business. So that's one thing to think about.
It doesn't bar people from coming into the city. We just don't require them to get a business license.
Does it state that in the ordinance?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
It's only the businesses with the physical address that must have a business license.
Okay. Moving on. When I say less restrictive means, we're going from a two-paragraph ordinance that we had previously to an ordinance that goes from 2 paragraphs that says the resident citizen of Fayetteville can place a sign on their property if they don't wish to be disturbed. We are going from that to requiring business license if it's a Fayetteville business to hour restriction, to solicitor permit, to photo ID, to fees, to background checks, and so forth. Okay. My position is that, our position at the newspaper is that the time restriction is too restrictive to accomplish, more restrictive than need be to accomplish the objective of the ordinance, which is, as Mr. Tennant stated, was to keep these itinerant vendors out and the people that are scam artists and so forth. Okay? We don't feel the ordinance should affect businesses that are doing things the right way. Okay? And there are actually 2 Circuit Court of Appeals rulings, 7th and 8th Circuit, that have addressed hours limitations previously. Both of those dealt with nonprofit, but they both struck down ordinances that limited solicitation to 6 p.m. in the evening and 8 p.m. in the evening, and then went back to 9 p.m. in the evening. Our request is that the hours be 9 p.m. So you're going from no time limit discussed in the existing ordinance. So you do have a time limit of 9 p.m., not after 9 p.m. Reason being is that most of our sales occur between 5 and 9 p.m. Our door-to-door solicitation happens 5 to 9 p.m. at night, Monday through Friday. The majority of our sales in Fayetteville actually come from our door-to-door solicitation. Okay. Putting a time restriction on that would severely limit our circulation and have a big impact on what we do, as much as 25% or more. Okay. We feel the other means available in the ordinance as far as requiring the background checks, requiring the photo ID, requiring the registration, the permit, and so forth, would achieve the objectives of the ordinance in keeping the people out. And I might go one step further and to say, if this passes, put a sign up at the entrances to the city of Fayetteville that says door-to-door solicitation required to register with the city. You know, so what happens is these groups come in, and I fight this. I've fought this a long time. We come behind these groups and these magazine salespeople, the candy salespeople. We come behind them. They come in. They're here for a week, and they're gone. They have a habit of hitting subdivisions near highways and interstates. They come in, they disperse, and they primarily work during the day. So the time limitation probably wouldn't have that big of an impact on them coming or not. The other components of the ordinance would. So they come in, they work, they get out, and they're gone. We've found that if a citation is written, those folks are often in the next state. They're young folks, they don't have any ties to the community. Okay? What we're asking is that the time restriction be 9 p.m. and not hurt local businesses that are doing things the right way. Okay? Not opposed to the background checks, although I would ask that there be a time frame put in as far as the offenses. There could be someone that's 18 years old and goes to the university and he's a freshman and gets in trouble and gets in a fight, so he's got a conviction. Okay? Should that preclude him 7, 8, 9, 10 years down the road from being able to go to work and go knock doors in Fayetteville, provided there's been no other offenses, okay? No other convictions. Same goes for a DUI. A non-driving position, someone that has had a DUI, can't drive for the company, but we go with the team leader in a van. They're not violent. They haven't stolen anything. Okay? They're not a sexual predator. You know, they made a mistake. Okay? So we ask that might be taken into account when you're looking at the background checks. I think that's all I have.
Yes.
Well, one comment about the background check. I think the word subject to background check gives off plenty of warning to people, whether we do background checks or not. I don't really care. That's not my deal. But I still like the subject to background check. My question is about you're talking about door-to-door sales in the evening. Is that circulation sales?
Yes, correct.
Okay. When I got your email, I asked several people that take the paper, as I do. I also read it online. And none of them have ever re-upped their paper because of someone coming to the door. They've all done it either online or through the phone calls or whatever. Do you have an idea of what percentage of your circulation sales do come from door-to-door sales at night? I mean, do you have a number or a guess?
In Northwest Arkansas, it's 48%.
It's almost half your circulation sales
Correct.
are from door-to-door.
Correct.
Really?
Our sales channels are this, just for the information for the council. We have kiosk sales, which is the storefront sales, which you'll see in front of Harps and Walgreens and so forth. We're at the mercy of store traffic, buying patterns, time of day, what have you. Paydays, we're at the mercy of all of that. If the traffic is slow coming in the store, obviously we don't see as many people. Okay? Telemarketing, we all know the pretty stringent telemarketing laws, the do not call list, the migration from landlines to cell phones, which we don't call cell phones. So that's a shrinking pool for an avenue for us to gain new subscribers. Okay, so that is shrinking. Both of those account for roughly about 20% of our circulation sales. The other come from direct marketing, direct mail, inserts into the newspaper racks, and so forth. So door-to-door is vital to our business. We knock doors. We already do background checks. We do pre-employment substance abuse screening. We do background checks. We carry photo IDs. We have a supervisor in the field with them when they're in the field. We try and do things the right way. When someone asks us to leave, we leave. We honor all no soliciting signs. I'm not saying that on occasion someone doesn't miss one, if it's inconspicuous and they miss it. But we train our folks to say, if they go up and they see it and they're at the door and someone's already opened the door, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your sign. Apologize for the intrusion and leave. Don't make the pitch, okay? I'm a sales guy, okay? I run the sales department through Northwest Arkansas. I don't have a no soliciting sign on my front door. I live in Fayetteville. I live on Ora Drive. I'm hit quite a bit, okay? I like to have fun with them sometimes, but that's me. I ask them questions, I make them jump through hoops, and then I say, no, sorry, not interested, and they're on the way. Sometimes I don't have time, sometimes I close the door. There are other methods for people to take than the legislation of the hours. They don't have to open the door. They can close the door. They can ask someone to leave. They can call the police if they don't leave, okay? We ask that be the case and that the hours be set at 9 p.m.
Any other question? Yes, Della.
Well, Mr. Smith, is that
Yes.
correct? I certainly don't want to do anything to lessen the newspaper business. I am pretty shocked that it's 48%, but I believe you, and I certainly would support moving that to 9 o'clock if you feel that would be. Now, is that the only thing, just the 9 o'clock? That was.
If there could be discussion on the time frame for convictions. I believe in second chances that provided the seriousness of the conviction, obviously, and maybe there's a sliding scale, but minor convictions, maybe it's a misdemeanor conviction if nothing else has happened within X number of years and there's been no other offenses, no other convictions. I'm a believer in second chances, and I want to give people the opportunity to earn a living.
And Alderman Gray, I should note that I left a memo on your table there that has two potential changes that were requested by the paper. One has not been spoken about tonight, but they told me about yesterday. I don't know if they're still interested in that or not. But they say that oftentimes they try to increase circulation by leaving sample papers at their carriers will just leave very early in the morning. They never try to contact the residents. They just leave the paper there. It does have an order form in it. And so the one possible amendment you might have is in the definition of solicitor, you remove that sort of behavior, because I've never heard anybody complain about getting a sample paper in the morning. So they would not be solicitors, therefore they wouldn't have to be registered or do anything like that. And they're not, normally they're employees, they're an independent contractor, I believe, the paper carriers. And so it would allow them to encourage people to become new subscribers without going door to door. Is that not something that you all do?
Correct. I will state that our door-to-door operations will follow up samples from time to time in the evening hours with a knock on the door to say, hey, did you get the sample? How did you like the paper? Can I answer questions about it? We'd like to sign you up and have you as a subscriber.
So if you can see the highlighted material I showed you on Exhibit A entitled paper version, meaning the newspaper version, that was one, and the second one was on the criminal background checks, and that would put a 5-year look-back period, 5 years from any conviction, and 5 years not being in prison, because maybe you could be convicted of a felony, be in prison for 20 years, but your conviction is 20 years ago. But I thought maybe we needed to have a 5-year good behavior time. So that is another thing, and it also requires a background check from the state police of the state that issued the person their driver's license, because they have informed me, and they probably know more about this than I do, that sometimes if you only get the Arkansas State Police check, it's not a nationwide check, it's a state police check. Maybe we should check the state where these people are usually residing from, the one that would issue them the driver's license, and see if there are problems in that state we should know about. So those were the two changes that I presented. I did not present the additional time. They have, under the proposal, 10 hours from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. during the summer, and 9 hours during the winter. And so it's really your judgment call on what you want to do and what you feel like is in the best interest of the citizens on that. That's just totally up to you.
Thank you, thank you. I believe I could certainly go along with both of the things that you've highlighted in our copy here. And personally, the 9 o'clock's okay with me, since Mr. Smith feels like it's very important to the newspaper. I agree with him, there are other ways to handle solicitors without legislation making it so tight. So I could agree with that.
Is that an amendment? I'll second it.
That's an amendment.
And I'll second it.
Okay. Amendment would be on the hours, 9 p.m., correct? And the background checks.
And you want 9 p.m. also in the wintertime?
I think it's fine.
Let's simplify it.
Yes.
Okay. All right, what else was on that?
Under section 4, the definition of solicitor.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second for those amendments. Is there
It's
any
still
public, I'm sorry.
I still think it's pretty restrictive, and I hope that it meets the needs. We can certainly revisit it. I did get a lot of support for this, people that mentioned it. They wanted to see it occur, and so I think this is a fine compromise, this amendment.
Okay. Is there any public comment on these amendments? Okay, bring it back to the council. So,
Mayor, if I could just make a comment from a staff perspective, just simply because we haven't totally researched it. As we read the ordinance, since each applicant shall provide the following, and that's where the criminal background check comes in. So I guess just a point of clarification, is the intent that the individual applying for the $5 peddler and solicitor permit would be the individual paying for their own criminal background check or providing the document for their criminal background check, because there's a budgetary impact to the city for background checks if it's something that we're having to pay for, that I just want to make sure is a part of this discussion. And then, without knowing some of the costs related to decals and things of that nature, we may be bringing back to you a budget adjustment for whatever cost might be associated to the implementation of the program. But Alderman Tenney, would you mind addressing just so we do what you want us to do as it relates to this?
Well, I've been thinking all along that any costs that are incurred, because I had a lot of people say, why are you charging anything at all? But knowing that staff time is taxpayer dollars, my intent was that any costs incurred would be to pay for that time. If your question is, I want to make sure I understand, that the person is paying that money for their background check, or are you asking if that doesn't?
Well, I know that the city pays more than $5 for a background check.
I understand.
And so if if this is to offset the staff time of processing or calculating, under D, it says in the last sentence, in applying for the permit, each applicant shall provide the following, which item 4 of that list is a criminal background check from the Arkansas State Police, which shows, their record, et cetera. So if that is a document that they produce, I guess the question is, do we want them providing a document, or do we want them providing the means for funding the request for a document? And we think we need to make that clear, just so that there's not a budgetary impact to the city paying to get those background checks.
Would you need time to come up with that dollar figure? Of what that might cost?
If you need us to get it, because I don't have it tonight, so yes.
No, I'm just saying, I'm not, we can, in my opinion, we can certainly wait until we get that dollar figure. My time frame here is only a little bit hurried, because I know summertime is a big time for these sort of people, but certainly a couple of weeks is not going to make a difference.
Yeah, and we'll get that for you.
Yeah, that'd probably be good to get that. And
I'm not sure if there's any charge, but if it is,
I don't
we want to
either.
know what it.
We don't know.
I don't know.
Yes, Ron.
You may remember at our meeting last Tuesday night, I suggested that I was going to ask Jeremy tonight about the impact on his office. I do believe that our city staff offices are already pretty taxed, and that we've been freezing positions for a long time, and I have a history on the council of voting against ordinances that I think are unenforceable. So my question, there were several questions about this. One was the cost of it, the cost of printing the decals, how the decals are distributed, how a citizen gets one. Can a POA president go distribute them to all the citizens in that POA, or does the citizen have to request it individually? What kind of staffing issues are there in your office with this? And how is it enforced? So if a citizen calls and says, I don't like it that these people are in my neighborhood, who goes? Code compliance, the police department, and then what are the penalties when they get there? And the solicitors are running, or the peddlers, or whatever we're calling them now, are running away. What are we doing? What's the enforcement of this? And I know I just alluded to that last Tuesday night, but those are the kinds of questions that I have, and that at least one citizen on my street was asking me about as well.
I'll try to capture all those. So certainly any new program adds a staffing issue. Obviously, we mentioned at the last budget meeting when we introduced the business license program, it came with staff, and it did not come with staff, and so that's obviously a concern, because we have another position now working 40 hours a week just doing the business license program. So I think that would add that to our staffing load, and so that means we may be discussing means to help with those issues. In terms of our actual workload, I actually think that the solicitation permits will be much less than the neighborhoods and citizens asking for no solicitation decals, which is what has so far been the case in Springdale, at least talking with their city clerk's office. They've issued several hundred no solicitation signs and decals, only about 6 or 7 solicitation permits for individuals or companies trying to solicit within the city limits. So that gives you an idea, I think, of the actual, the workload in terms of what it means to us. For sort of imagining how we would do this, I think we would order our decals in bulk, have those available. There's no charge for those based on this ordinance from citizens, so we would simply have those at ready for a citizen to pick up. I would certainly imagine.
Will you mail them if the citizen calls?
I doubt we would mail them.
Okay.
They would need to come by the city, because that would be an additional cost for us. I would say that we would likely, for efficiency purposes, if a POA president or HOA neighborhood organization got together and citizens wanted those, we could certainly try to distribute those. Obviously, within means, if someone requests 100 of them and there's not even 100 people within that neighborhood, we're not going to give that, because again, that's a city resource. And so we would just have to be cognizant of how we did that. But I certainly think that's a rational way to help distribute those for citizens and residents. In terms of enforcement, as noted, during the daytime, our code officers could certainly be called, and if those activities are operating within our normal 8 to 5 working hours, that certainly could be an avenue for that. It would simply be an additional call they would try to respond to. However, after hours, it likely would be our non-emergency police number, which is how Springdale again operates their enforcement actions. Most of those cases you're going to have to catch someone, and so if they're not still around, as Mr. Smith mentioned, they're not there to catch, it's hard to enforce anything. If we can get information about that from that resident, if they actually took some information, we could certainly try to follow up on that. But that's always going to be a difficult scenario. The penalty, there is no immediate penalty. We can't just go give them a fine. That's not something that we have the authority to do. We would follow our standard, I think you mentioned the enforcement section here is our standard penalty.
Yes, it's just a general enforcement section as it is for all ordinances, that are not specific on how much the fine will be, and that's up to a $500 fine, but it is administered through the district court upon their conviction.
Okay, thank you.
I might also add that code compliance staff have very specific things that they are authorized to address, and currently this is not one of those. So if the intention is for it to fall under code compliance, I think we would need to give them the authority to address it. Otherwise, I would say it would be handled by the police department, which is how we currently handle a call if we get this inquiry.
And I think the police department would be the more proper agency to enforce this.
Even on 8 to 5 hours?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Those are great answers. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Well, we have the amendments. Yes, sir.
On the amendment, on section 4, about the newspaper being able to leave a sample of the newspaper at your door. I mean, generally this sounds good, but I had an experience where I came home from vacation and there were 4 newspapers stacked up outside my house, which is a pretty clear sign to a burglar that you're away, come rob me. And so I would like to hear if anyone has any suggestions on how we could perhaps minimize that possibility.
Were they all sample newspapers?
They were all sample newspapers. I subscribe to the online edition because I don't like to waste the paper. So, maybe if there was a limit of 1 newspaper, and if there's one already there, they can't leave more. But still, you've got 1 newspaper sitting out in your driveway for 4 days, potentially advertising to a burglar that you're not home.
Around that. Can I ask
Yes,
him a
go ahead.
question? If someone calls your office and says, "Stop giving me samples. I'm an online subscriber only," does that stop?
Yes. We have provisions in our circulation management software that our acronym is TMC, never TMC, which is total market coverage. When someone calls and says, "I don't want any more samples, I don't want you to knock my door, I don't want you to call," we mark that, and their record and their address does not appear on any route list, any delivery list, anything for a carrier to even see to throw paper.
So it's
I'm
still,
not sure.
It still might happen once, I guess. I would hate to limit their ability to do that because a call into them would stop that theoretically from ever happening again, provided you weren't robbed the first time.
Right, so maybe if they could just,
I
not leave it,
understand
if there's
your
one,
point.
don't add a second one.
I understand your point.
So maybe if there were just a limit of one in the drive or
But then
mailbox
there
or
are those
whatever.
phone books. I mean, that's a different company, isn't it?
Yeah, but people
They're
just leave those on the porch
Uh,
anyway.
I think rather than legislating it, I think you can
A
deal with
comment
that.
on that is that we do, if there's one, if there's two, pick them up, because they're not there, especially if they're samples. Not saying we're perfect, okay, we have over 230 carriers in Northwest Arkansas, so, and they change over, okay, independent contractors. But we do have employees, staff, district managers that are in the field at 2 a.m. to follow up to make sure things are happening the way they should be happening. So I would say that we try to do the best job that we can to prevent this, and we do have provisions in place to make sure that if someone does not want to be sampled or have their door knocked, we have provisions in place to minimize that.
Well, we have before us the amendments, correct? All right, any other discussion on those? Okay.
So from what you said, Don, would you entertain further amendments to this that would answer some of those questions that you presented from staff?
What I would hope is that if you address these amendments, that maybe you hold it to the next meeting
See,
and we
we're-
get you the
This
cost
is an
items so you know
ordinance
the
and-
budgetary.
And then we could bring the other concern, okay, that.
Yeah,
helps.
I'm in
It'll
support of
hold 2
them getting
weeks, I know it
the
will.
cost analysis to make everybody feel more
So
comfortable.
you're good with that?
Yes.
Okay, good.
But I think
Awesome.
I think we can vote on the amendment, but then hold it.
Fabulous, thank you
On
for
the
that
second reading,
clarification.
On the first, or?
Mr. Mayor, one comment,
Yes.
one more comment on the background checks. We currently go to the state police and actually we run those and provide those and bring them when we go to Springdale or any other municipality that requires them. We provide the background checks. We absorb the expense already. And in the interest of time, that we don't know what the time requirement would be for the city as far as how long it would take to get an answer back, what the additional cost is. If we're doing one background check with the Arkansas State Police for our people, and we would like that to be able to be applicable to the city of Fayetteville, the city of Springdale, the city of Bentonville, and so forth. So we would ask that we be allowed to bring that, provided it's current within an acceptable time frame that the city deems acceptable.
Well, and that's how the ordinance currently reads. It says, in applying for the permit, each applicant shall provide the following to the planning department: a criminal background check from the Arkansas State Police and from the state police of the state which issued the driver's license of the applicant. I think Bentonville is looking at a very similar ordinance to ours. This is, like I said, this was the language from Springdale, which does allow the applicant to provide their own background check. I do think that would provide a terrific more work on the planning department if they had to apply for it. There are privacy problems sometimes when someone other than the actual person asks for the background check. You know, they don't just get that out to everybody. There has to be some, I think, probably waivers that would be allowed. I mean, you can get it, but you usually, if you want to get it on your employee, I think you have to have the employee consent to it. And so that's why I think Springdale had it in this way, where the applicant provided it. That has a downside in that, you know, is somebody gonna provide an improper background check? So that's always an issue too, but you can't solve every tiny problem with legislation. And it might be that we could just allow it to be provided by the applicant. If we see that that's been a problem, if we get some improper background checks, and we might need to go back and revisit this. But right now, it would not be where planning would have to do it. They would just receive it.
Right, and I think that's the point we want to make clear. We would prefer to not be in the background check business for all of these. We'd like for them to be provided, but as we read this, we also see that it applies to, with the exception of the Girl Scouts, could apply to any elementary, junior high, or high school selling items, whether those schools were providing background checks for those students to be able to solicit, whether they would be different than a company that might be doing that as a part of their hiring process. So we just want clarification. I think it's, and then weighing that against Alderman Tennant's intentions, because obviously if the concern is a deterrent, or if I can create a fictitious background check, you know, is that a concern or not a concern as you weigh this? And as it relates to the staff, if we have to start getting background checks, then it is going to be processing time, even more so, because it's going to require a consent for background, just as it would in employment.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I don't think we can solve everything with
No.
legislation. And I just feel strongly that to leave it as it is, that the applicant provides the background check. And, then I would like to see that be left the way it is.
Well, if we vote on the other amendments, then we're gonna come back in 2 weeks and we can discuss a lot of this again, can we not?
We can if we need to wait 2 weeks.
Well,
I thought we were waiting 2 weeks to find out the amount it was gonna charge.
Well, it's an ordinance, so it's gonna be, if you're gonna wait on that, then we might as well wait 2 weeks.
If we need to wait on that.
If you need to wait.
I was saying I don't think we need to wait on it.
Oh, okay.
We might want to suspend the rules this way.
That's right. I'm saying we
Oh,
might want to
absolutely.
suspend the rules and go to the second reading.
Hey,
Let's vote on the
I
amendment
gotta do
first.
those amendments first.
Thank you.
All right, now back to the amendments. Everybody good with the amendments? Okey dokey. All right, Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Schottenmeier.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Long.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Marsh.
Yes.
Kenyon.
Yes.
Petty.
Yes.
Tennant.
Yes.
All right, now we're back to the ordinance. Now, do you all want to wait, or do you want to plow on through, or?
I would like to see us vote on it
Well,
tonight.
all right.
Let me make one comment here. Even though I basically copied a lot of the language from the Springdale ordinance, it might be that we want to exclude from background checks nonprofits, especially youths or something like that, and maybe only require the background checks out of the for-profit entities. I don't know what you want to do on that, something you might want to think about. I don't know how much schools go door to door, school children. I don't get door to door people where I live, so I don't know. You all would know better than that, but we certainly don't want to do too much in this way. I would also note that this is to some extent going to be a complaint-driven enforcement. I don't think that if your neighbor child shows up and says, will you buy some candy, you're probably going to say, where's your permit? And I'm calling the police. Anyway, that's something you might want to think about on the requirement for background checks. We might want to be more limited to that on who we're going to actually require to have a background check. If you want to leave it on this reading. I know you want to get it passed so we can get protection for our citizens. But you might want to consider that. That's a good point that was brought out.
Mayor,
Councilman-
that's fine with me.
Councilman Tennant, you're the sponsor of this, what do you want to do?
Well, I've already said that I would be in support of holding it for a couple of weeks. Just, it sounds like that I don't want to push anything through because my intent is not to burden the staff, and that would be my main concern. And I think we can still get the spirit of this thing passed in a couple of weeks after we make some changes. And I think Ron has made some good points as well about getting a little bit more cost analysis for it. Even if there's anything to that, I think it's okay to wait a couple of weeks.
Will you be amenable to going to the second, suspending the rules and going to the second reading?
I'd be fine with that.
Yes, Rhonda.
And there's one other thing I'd like to ask the staff to check into. Alderman Marsh, Councilwoman Marsh printed pictures tonight on, I think, photograph paper, probably from your own computer.
Yeah.
Is it possible that we could figure out a way to let citizens print their own stickers from their own home? I don't know what that does to staff, but it seems to me that some of the complaints, sometimes we have people who don't want to come to City Hall for things, for water bills or whatever. So maybe we could, at the same time, roll out a way for a citizen to print his or her own sticker that they tape to the inside of their front door, whatever, that's color that they make themselves, and you have some sort of way of, I don't know what that means, but.
That's already a viable option. You can buy those at any local.
So you don't have to come to the office to get this specific.
No, they buy their own,
Any
stick 'em in the
sticker's
window.
fine.
That's correct.
Okay, well, I think we ought to make that very clear, because someone asked me about that, how they would get the sticker. So really, that's not an issue at all. Okay,
And-
that's good to
Good
know.
point, though.
And just sitting here, I do think that we would probably recommend that you look at some exemption. I mean, you're tying your background check to an Arkansas State Police to an issued driver's license. A 9-year-old fifth grader, or ever how old you are when you're in the fifth grade, isn't going to have one of those. So there probably may be some things you want to look at, just as you did within the Girl Scouts portion. We're supportive of this ordinance. We're very supportive of this ordinance because we get calls on it. We just want to work out the logistics, because it'll be the staff that gets criticized if we do it the wrong way, or and while we think people won't do it, we have learned that there will be citizens that don't want a Girl Scout cookie sold to their home, even though many people might do it and not complain.
Yes.
I'd like to suspend the rules for the second reading.
Second.
We have a motion to second, to go to the second reading. Sandra, would you please call?
Who was the second on that?
Mark, I believe.
Shopmire?
Yes.
Adams?
Yes.
Long?
Yes.
Gray?
Yes.
Marsh?
Yes.
Kenyon?
Yes.
Petty?
No.
Tenet?
Yes.
An ordinance to enact section 116.02, door-to-door solicitation regulations for private residents into the Fayetteville Code.
Okay, we're going to leave it on the second reading. Everybody good with that?
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right, moving right along. Number 4. Thank you. Amend resolution number 183-12, resolution to amend resolution number 183-12, which approved a contract to allow access to City of Fayetteville sewage system in order to approve an amended agreement. Adela, I believe you brought this forward.
Yes, I had a call from the owners of this particular development, and they asked that we make some changes, and I think it was based on working together with the county. So I would like for our attorney to explain more carefully, and I was certainly happy to support the Humont area.
Okay, thanks. As you all remember, back on, or some of you all remember, back on September the 4th of 2012, the Fayetteville City Council passed a resolution number 183-12, which approved a contract with Humont Village developers to allow the extension of the city's sewage system beyond the city limits to the proposed Humont Village development. The contract stated that they would need to develop pursuant to residential single-family 4 units per acre standards and comply with all other development regulations of the city, because we did not want to give any unfair advantage to someone that was developing outside the city, even though we did not want them to have one of those concentrated sewer systems that have sometimes had problems when they're so close to the city and would likely be annexed in the future. And so instead of requiring them to do that, the city council gave them the right to connect to our sewer systems now, rather than create this community septic system. The developer had already received the county does zoning in a kind of a strange way. Everything's zoned residential single family 1 unit per acre, unless you get a conditional use. So that they do all their zoning through conditional use. And their conditional use approved the development that Humont Estates had. Unfortunately, it was different standards than residential single family 4 units per acre. So they could not comply both with what our contract said and what they had received from the county. There was also some issues about how the roads would be developed, because initially they will remain in the county, and so the county will have to maintain them, and so the county wants them built to their standards, and so that was another issue. informed the developer that they needed to try to resolve these issues with the county, bring it back to the planning commission, and then back to the city council when all the issues were resolved. And that's what they did. The planning commission approved it, subject to your final approval of this contract change. They approved the development, and the roads are going to be built to both our standards and the county standards, dedicated initially to the county, and if it's ever annexed in, then they'll be dedicated to the city. And they're not going to be, they'll be complying with the county requirements for their zoning as opposed to RSF 4. We do have a representative of the proposed developer here. She was here back in September of last year to explain it, and I guess Kim can explain it again, and I'll leave it to her.
I'm Kim Hesse. I'm here representing Phil Phillips and Huemont Village LLC. As many of you guys remember, this was a development that was actually originally approved in 2005, constructed around 2008. Through the various changes through the partnership, different contractors went out of business. The development pretty much just became stalled. It is approximately 90% constructed. All the water and sewer is in. The collection system for the sewer is in. Streets are in, drainage is in. And the developer came to us requesting to try to get the finished final plat. All of his development rights had expired, and so we are going back through the original process. Conditional use permit was required of the county. Preliminary plat process required of both the county and the city. And in this process, the developer realized that his original design was for a packaged sewage treatment system. He was totally agreeable to construct that system and maintain that system, but what he realized is that this is a long-term commitment. He feels that the development will be annexed in eventually. The rules for both the county and the city is once you are annexed, that you take yourself offline those package treatment systems and you hook onto the city. So he felt it was inevitable that he would be hooking onto the city system. And I think a lot of the council, as well as the immediate neighborhood, were concerned about the treatment system that was designed for the development. And so we came back in June 2012. We requested to be heard by the sewer committee, and from there came to your council. We have been through the city's process. At this point, we're meeting all of the new drainage requirements that have not been completely approved yet, or I guess they're not an ordinance yet, but we are working with the draft drainage. We are meeting the city's requirements for streets, drainage, the county's requirements. So I felt the developers going above and beyond. In order to hook onto your sewer, he felt that that's best for the neighborhood, the city, and for his long-term interests. We have been through many neighborhood meetings. The neighbors do seem to be very much behind this development. That was a requirement of the county for the conditional use permit. And I'd like to say that we had almost the entire neighborhood in support and showed that support at the council level. So if there's any questions I can answer, I'd be more than happy to.
What questions do we have for Kim on this?
I have a question.
Sure.
What specifically were the conflicts between our RSF 4 standards and the county's conditional use permit?
The original design was pretty much per your RSF standards. And when we requested a conditional use permit and when we met with the city of Fayetteville over bringing this back under current conditions, none of them liked that design. It was very much a gridded subdivision. Every lot was exactly the same. And so they requested we come up with something more unique. So we developed a system of a linear park through the center. So there's quite a bit of park space. I think there's 10 acres of park space. And since the roads were already constructed, we really couldn't move roads around. So what we did is we shifted lots around. And so there are some lots that are alley design, which makes them narrower than the standard. And there are some lots that we are requesting some different setbacks because of the green spaces.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any public comment on this? Seeing none, bring it back to the council. So wishes to council.
I move we pass the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass the resolution. Any final comment? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm sure that, I think taken in the abstract, there's a fine plat, and I know that you've acted in good faith, so I don't want to give you the wrong impression. But I can't vote for this again, just like before, and it's for the same reason. You know, we have to draw the line somewhere. We drew that line at the city limits. I think it's presumptive to assume that we're gonna annex this in the future. And, you know, what's stopping us from saying, if this is the trend, the adjacent property, even farther to the west, that we're gonna extend sewer lines to them? And how do we say that's fair when there's still people inside the city that don't have sewer access because we have chosen not to spend the money on it? You know, I just can't wrap my head around that.
Thank you. Yes, Mark.
I'd like to, there were some extenuating circumstances here, and that is the proximity if there was a failure in the system. And this came to the Water and Sewer Committee with a great deal of discussion. The concern was if there's a failure, it goes right into the creek where we have the effluent of our east side plant, and then suddenly we have the concern of how to handle that anyway. So to say that it's the same as any other neighborhood, or it's there's a line drawn somewhere, Matthew is right, we did draw the line. But after touring it and after looking at it extensively through the Water and Sewer Committee, we did not want to take the risk of a failure of a system that's going to impact the effluent from the east side plant anyway. And so while we do not think that this was a forward, well thought out development with this in mind, it is there, it's going to be developed, and we're through the Water and Sewer Committee, and Adela, you were there when we discussed it, we felt like that we weren't pleased about it, but we felt like it was the right thing to do in this situation since it was established and we needed to look forward. And again, it is presumptive to think that we're going to annex it, but it's not presumptive to know that if there was a failure that we would have to deal with the consequences.
Any other comments? Okay. Sandra, would you please call the roll?
Shopmire.
Yes.
Adams.
Yes.
Long.
No.
Gray.
Yes.
Marsh.
Yes.
Kenyon.
Yes.
Petty.
No.
Tennant.
Yes.
All right. All right, what announcements do we have? Any announcements tonight?
We've got several people going to the municipal league
Yes.
this week, and I'm glad that any alderman that's going, I thank you for going. I think it's probably a good thing to do. And I'll see you down there because I'm going to the City Attorney Association seminar, so I'll see you down there.
Good.
Mayor, other announcements we have are that we're currently in a National Adopt a Cat Month, where fees are waived for the adoptions of cats here in the city of Fayetteville through June the 22nd. We've taken in over 140 cats and kittens in the last 30 days, so we're encouraging adoption through waiving of fees. We also are proud to announce that the Fayetteville City Fire Department, the International Fire Department, and EMS are joining together in part for a Safety and Health Week. It's the week of June the 16th through the 22nd with a focus on safety and health education. We also are reminding citizens that the City of Fayetteville Transfer Station at the Solid Waste Division is closed for repairs to our floor and are not accepting items to be dropped off at the transfer station this week through the 23rd. If all goes well, we hope to open next week. We're also proud that the City of Fayetteville was awarded a FEMA Firefighter Assistance Grant for $120,736 for urban firefighting gear. This is especially pertinent considering the wildfires that are taking place out west. This is gear that's allowed us in a city that has 57, we received 57 wildland fire calls last year here in the city of Fayetteville. And so it gives us the opportunity to be better at fighting those calls. So I want to remind citizens that the Wheeler Brothers, who are from Austin, Texas, part of our Gully Park concert series, were rescheduled for July the 18th. So this is just to mark the date and add that to your calendars that wasn't previously. And then lastly, an exciting item for Fayetteville is that we are a part of hosting the Air Race Classic, where we have 47 teams of female aviators who are set to touch down this week at the Fayetteville Executive Airport as a part of the 2013 Air Race Classic. It's an event that started in 1977. The race actually begins today in Pasco, Washington. It includes stops in Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Colorado, and Oklahoma. And the last final leg of the 2,450-mile race ends right here in Fayetteville on Thursday and Friday. The public is invited to stop by the airport, watch the planes land as each team competes in the race. So an exciting event that's taking place here this week.
Okay. All right. I don't know who's going to Municipal League. I will be there Wednesday, Thursday, and coming back on Friday. So, huh?
I'm going.
Good.
Mark is going.
Good.
Sarah's going.
I'm going.
And
Good.
Alan
I'm leaving in
is
about
going.
15 minutes.
Are you gonna leave tonight? Yeah. All right. Anyway, I don't have anything else. Thank you all. It was a good evening. Good work.